Well, it's wonderful to be here. And it's wonderful to be here with you as teachers, where I teach college, and the students that you teach can feed into the college spectrum, and then we learn some of the things that you teach them, and they teach us new things. So there was something I did just last week that was coming out of a high school where I had the way I taught it, and a student rose his hand and just said, you know, my high school teacher taught me this, and it was a better way to do it, so it's my new way to do it. Today I want to talk to you about creating stories for our students. Some of you teach at the elementary school level, so you may need some mathematical stories. Given that you're here, maybe, maybe not. But there are always students that need that positive story. And I'm going to tell you what I tell my class on the first day of class in that math hater class that we have at college. The last math class they will ever take in their life. They wouldn't be taking it if it wasn't a requirement for graduation. Often that's the course I ask to teach because it's the last chance that we have. So I'm standing at the front. We've gone through the syllabus, which in a math class only makes sense when you're done the course anyway because most of it's telling you what you're going to learn. And if you knew what you were going to learn, you wouldn't be in the class. Once I'm done with the syllabus, I turn to the students and I say, my primary goal in this class with you is that by the end of the class, you have one story, one good story to tell about mathematics. For many of you, that's not the case. You don't have anything. Someday, a child, your own or one that loves you, is going to sit at a table and turn to you and tell you that they are interested in one of our STEM fields. You need to have one story, one, to tell about mathematics in a positive way. Because it's been shown that that has an impact on that student's future in STEM. That is my goal, because that is as much on me as a teacher of math as it is on you. So we have 16 weeks to find that story. It's that moment right there that the students relax, that they actually just meld more into their chair. They're not ready to just pounce out of the classroom. It's that moment when they realize that they can have their own story, their own moment in class, that math takes root and that we begin our journey together. I want to give you a variety of ways that I do that so that you can find your own way to be a mathematical storyteller. The first thing is that I believe that math class, every class, is guided by this. We do not remember days, we remember moments. Think of one of the best moments you've had in class. It could be when you're teaching or when maybe you were in a class as a child or a youth. I'm sorry, that's on automatic forward, so I'll just move it forward. If you think of that particular moment that you had, you probably remember just a blip. What happened before it? What happened after it? Often that is difficult to remember. That's what I believe we can do in class. Sometimes the story that you give your student, that moment that they remember years later, is just a moment in class. Even with the SOLs, even with everything we have that we have to do, I bet we can take 30 seconds in a minute to create those moments, those footholds that students can stand on to peer out and look at the array and the landscape that mathematics offers us. All right, so I'm going to start with this one. And this is a magic trick that dates back to 1956, the writer Martin Gardner. Martin Gardner is credited with really beginning what we call recreational math. So in the introduction, Sudoku was pointed out. Sudoku would be often considered recreational math. To me, it's more logic than math because it really doesn't need to be numbers. It can be lots of things, but nonetheless, that's that type of field. Okay, so what I want you to do is pick a number between 10 and 19. Okay? You've got your number, and then you're going to start at the tail of the 9, and I'm going to have you count. So I'm going to pick the number 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Whoops, 9, 10, 11. You keep going around. Keep track of where you ended. You can use your finger, but keep track of where you ended. Okay, now I'm going to swipe away the tail, Now, wherever you are, you're going to go back clockwise. But wait, the one you're pointing at is number 1. So if I was right here, I would go 1, 2, 3. So wherever you are, that is 1, 2, 3, and count up to your number again. Okay? Now, through the magic of a hot breakfast, I say that you ended right there. Okay? So before I do this, I want to tell you a story. I was invited to a career day at a local middle school. And they said, Tim, would you come and speak at this middle school? I said, sure. And they said, we want you to talk about applications of mathematics. I was like, okay. And so I get in there, and the speaker before me was in this library space, and the students are super attentive. Like, they're in middle school. It was incredible. I was like, oh, this is going to be really easy. Then the speaker finished, all the students stood up and walked out the door, and my host came to me and said, okay, now we're going to bring in your group. You've got the other group. And they started filing in, and if you teach, you'll understand that I knew I needed to change my talk very, very quickly to have as little math as possible for a little while. And so I rearranged my slides very quickly, and I started with this. And so at the end, I went right there, and a boy in the front row goes, that wasn't what I got. His friend across the way went, Jeremy, that's because you never pay attention. And he goes, oh, yeah, right. So I'm not sure that's the Math-nificent story I'm looking for Jeremy, but nonetheless, it's a helpful reminder. So let's go through this trick and how it works, because you don't have to remember exactly how many pennies that I have here. Okay, so when you pick your number, you count. So if I counted 11, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, right up here. Okay, I can't seem to get that to work, but I'd be up. Then I come back, 1, 2, 3, and right when I hit this upper, once I sweep it away, once I sweep it away, I hit this upper point right there. That's where the top of the tail was. How many will I have left at that point, no matter where I was? Well, I got there by following the tail, right? So how many are in the tail? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So let's go back to that spot, and we'll count around. So once you hit the tail, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that's precisely where I pointed. So that can be a little bit disappointing once you see the way it worked. But I claim that that's actually a lesson about mathematics. Math itself can seem magical to people. The person next to you seemed to magically do something that I can't do. They're not a magician. It happens that they just saw the trick, if you will, which in itself is a dangerous term in math. It's not really a trick. It's an insight. It's a way to do it. Well, one of the reasons I do these types of things is to try to answer this question, the proverbial question in mathematical classrooms. Why? Why am I doing this? I like to try to answer that before it's even asked, so that we're actually approaching that from the very outset. Some students so love the field, they don't need an answer to that question. They just love whatever you give them. But for some students, the why is the connection that they need to the field. So the reason I do that trick is to simply underscore that math can seem magical, but math makes the magical logical. If something seems like it's taking magic to do it, it's simply that you haven't picked up the logic that's underneath it. And that's true in life itself. Life itself can seem so magical at times. Now, some parts of life aren't necessarily quantifiable. When I met my wife, that's not a quantifiable moment. That's a moment I remember. I remember it well. The birth of my children. I'm not sure I would quantify that. But there are other moments in life that we sometimes think are magical that math can help us understand why it helped. And we'll see some of those in a little bit. All right, let's try another one. Math can make the complex simple. That's that trick, right? You saw the trick. Several of you went, whoa. Then you see it, and it's always true with magic. Really? That's it? That's all? But isn't that at one level what we're looking for in math? I just taught a section to my students yesterday in calculus, or 2 days ago, where when we taught it, I said, you know what's fun about this section is that as challenging as it is today, by the time you're done this chapter, this is the section you look at and go, really? That was it? And that in itself is an important lesson. We train our minds like we can train our muscles. Whereas they get fit, then suddenly running the 100 yards isn't as hard. Doing that math problem isn't as hard. It's not a matter of being gifted. It's a matter of training and getting in shape. And when we think that we need some type of giftedness to do it, that can isolate who is actually doing the field. You heard my introduction. I'm a mime. I'm a puppeteer. I was that before I really was a mathematician. For some time, I wasn't really sure I should be doing math. I could be doing math, and yet I seem to do it well. Why? Because I happen to be a performing artist. Wouldn't the world be a richer place if we believed that wherever you are, wherever you sit, you will have a good story of math? And when I talk to those students, I tell them not only will you have one story of math, this is a math class. Once you got one, we're going for two. And the best part is most of the students let me know what that story is when they find it. Because for them, that is the moment they remember. And they can tell me a year later what those stories are. All right, let's see an example of making the complex simple. So this is another magic type trick. This actually comes out of the Math Bites book that was mentioned. This one was created for The Guardian, which is a paper out of London, and it was released on April 1st, and the title was The Empire State Building Disappears. And in a second, we'll see in this version of the puzzle, it appears. How many Empire State Buildings do you count there? There are 14. Now, this is a real trick. This is not a trick that I'm doing on the screen with like Photoshop or anything. It would physically do this if you cut it out. So there are 3 pieces to the puzzle. Can you make that out? There's one long piece along the bottom and 2 smaller pieces along the top. Then I simply switch their place. And now how many Empire State Buildings do I have? I have 15. Okay? Turn to someone next to you and talk about, it might be how I did it, but what do you notice in the picture? Let's just start with what do you see? All right? So talk and see what you see in this picture where I picked up one more. Okay. All right. So there's a lot to see. And one of the things you can do with students is just ask them what they see. Don't ask for the solution. Just ask, what do you see? Well, it turns out the easiest way to see what I did is if you actually reorder the pieces. You reorder them like this. Then it turns out that the second puzzle actually correlates to a shift like that. All I did was shift it over one onto a blank space. This one looks like there's no blank space, but there's a blank, it actually goes one more over into a blank space. So now let's watch the puzzle. Do you see those blank spaces in there? Now here we go. We're going to swap like that. Each one lost 1/14 of its total area, which is usually what people pick up, is that something's not quite right. So I do this with various shapes. The London originally wanted me to do it with David Beckham, but if you think about it, everything's losing a little bit, so there was one decapitated David Beckham. So we didn't go with that. So anyway, there are a variety of them in the book. So another one is that math can capture the complex in our world. And this one I want to show you because it relates to the game Angry Birds. This came out of teachers. I was teaching a seminar with teachers, and I just made the passing comment that Angry Birds, the red bird that you start with, actually follows a parabola. That's all I said. And then a week later, they said, my students are so excited you're going to be teaching us that. I was like, teaching you what? And they said, the Angry Birds. So by the next week, I was teaching them about the Angry Birds, but not at that moment. So how is that the case? Well, it turns out that the Angry Birds, those red initial birds in the game, actually have a model of no air resistance. They look like it because their feathers are going, but they're not. They actually are following a parabolic curve or a quadratic on each one. So you are determining that initial angle, which is often part of what people are trying to do. Well, not only that, you can connect that to the middle school curriculum. In fact, there's a teacher in North Carolina that when she taught this concept for her students, for our SOL type tests, she taught it all in this context. So she taught them how to think of everything in terms of Angry Birds. Even more, when they read the word problems, they translated them into Angry Bird problems. And the students actually did better on it in terms of the way that they did it. This is the story that they could relate to. This is the one that they could put context around, and they were able to think. So that's in this Math Bites book. There's a variety of topics that connect to things I did with teachers. One of them is Twitter. That's a middle school topic where you have exponential growth and how exponential growth can lead to a movie bombing when people tweet and retweet. One of my favorite ones is an M&M where you can make M&M mosaics, and there's some online code that can help you with that. One elementary school made their school mascot out of M&Ms with a project. And then the one at the top with pie, you can just take chocolate chips, which of course can just be ripped pieces of paper, but I don't then teach when I leave, so I'm very willing to do it with caffeinated candy. And, but there's where you make a grid and you can make an estimate for pi. And it's a lot of fun and kids enjoy it. So anyway, those are some ideas that are in there. Okay, so another one is that math gets real. This one connects to the mime. I'm not going to do the full mime sketch where I come out and interact with you. But this is a mime sketch, and what I want to connect to is actually it connects back to Angry Birds. Angry Birds is a model. That model has to look real for you to believe it. So right now, I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to get a ball. And I'm going to take this ball, and I'm going to throw it, and it's going to go in that bag. And it turns out that the only way that this actually will look real to you is if that model looks real in terms of the way that I'm following it. Do you see a ghost image? Sometimes people think they see something. There is nothing there. And yet, right then there was, in terms of the way that it moved. This was so real one time when I was at a Renaissance festival in Charlotte. 10,000 kids on campus for that event. And I took the ball out, and I gave it to a young woman who'd already seen the sketch. She brought her friend back to see it. And she said, "Give me the ball." So I gave her the ball. She gets the air. I give the ball, and she literally goes, "It's hot! It's hot!" And she goes, "Dave, here." Now keep in mind, I'm no longer involved. I'm just standing there. And she goes like this. He reaches out and grabs it with the mime illusion. And he goes, "It is hot! It is hot!" And then out of nowhere, he flips it, and through like the grace of the mime god, I actually caught the thing in the right timing. But that's precisely the point, is that over and over again, the math models, those real problems that we connect students to, are because they can capture the world. Well, that's not realistic. Neither is a bird traveling through the air with no air on the planet Earth. Neither is throwing a ball of air into nothing and having it look real. But much of our world is modeled so that we can have better medicine, so our cars can be more sustainable, so that our buildings can be more comfortable. So modeling plays a very important role. Really quick, the way that this works, I am just snapping my finger into the way it works. And if you teach elementary school children, they don't have to know how to snap. It's not the sound, it's the movement, if you understand what I'm saying. They don't need that dexterity to do it. So I have a sketch on Vimeo, if you look it up, that has that on there. And sometimes I'm a little better at it than you, but nonetheless. Okay, I've got another one. Math can prove the unintuitive. And for this one, I just want to connect it for a moment to a field where it talks about, it's a visual field. It's called topology. And it says that if you play a game and you have a donut like I have there, you can't get to that knot without, like if I hold this like this, I can't create that other shape without disconnecting it and then reconnecting it. You can't do it. Math can tell us that. Well, by knowing that mathematically, it means no matter what, you can't do it. So one of the things I'll do with kids is I'll give them this and say, is there any way without letting go that you can get this into a knot? And you tell me what you think. And they try and they try. I don't think so. Then I tell them that math does this. And then I try this. So what happened right there? Some will say, well, you made a knot. But what does this say? It can't be a knot. Precisely. It looked like it, but it's not. One of the biggest things about math is our eyes will fool us and fool us. Were there really 15 Empire State Buildings that were exactly like the 14? No. Exactly. And for those of you who have kids that will not show their work, you show your work because your eyes can fool you. Your brain can fool you. Your brain may decide it doesn't care, so it's just going to skip that step because it's ready to do something else, even if you're concentrating. That's one of the ways that I get students to show work and what they do. Let me show you a couple more. I'm almost out of time, but I do want to show you this particular sketch, and then I will show you one related to sports. Because of my work in sports, I've had a number of people ask. But this is a true mime sketch. So this sketch is that it connects to our interests. I do mime, and at one point I went, why don't I start trying to do math with mime? And I want to show you a sketch that has that. So I decided that what is it like to be the remainder? If you have like the number 5, and you put it into groups of 2, you'll have 2 groups of 2 and then 1 left over. Well, this particular sketch deals with, I've never done it in a suit jacket, so I'm just going to take that off. This sketch connects to what it's like to be the remainder.
Le piano du pauvre se noue autour du cou. La chanson guimauve, Toscanini s'en fout. Mais il n'est pas chien et le lui rend bien, il est éclectique. Sonate ou java, concert ou polka, il aime la musique. Le piano du pauvre, c'est le Chopin du printemps. Sous le soleil mauve, des lilas de neige, il roucoule un brin à ceux qui se plaisent bien, il fait des avances. Ravel ou machin, c'est déjà la fin, mais v'là qui recommence. Le piano du pauvre se noue autour du cou. La chanson guimauve, Toscanini s'en fout. Mais il n'est pas chien et le lui rend bien, il est éclectique. Sonate ou java, concerto polka, il aime la musique. Le piano du pauvre, c'est le Chopin du printemps. Sous le soleil mauve, des lilas de neige, il roucoule un brin à ceux qui se plaisent bien, il fait des avances. Ravel ou machin, c'est déjà la fin, mais v'là qui recommence.
There you go. So when I do that in class, give me 1 second, here we go. When I do that in class, the biggest thing that I do with my students is I actually perform it twice. I say the first time I just want you to watch. If you see nothing mathematical, that's fine. That'll be for the second time. So let's watch it twice. For those of you who teach, most of the kids that watch this sketch begin counting. He's holding 5! And they begin to kind of, when it's a school assembly type format. If you watch very carefully, though, in the sketch, I'm often using prime numbers, which is very helpful for classroom settings because it didn't need to be a group of 2. So underneath that, well, what if he tried a group of 3? What if he tried groups of 4? It's just I don't have a long enough table, and I don't want to take the time to do it. So that's the only reason that's not there. One other thing with math is it helps with decisions. One of those is March Madness. March Madness is a time when you get an initial pairing of the teams and you're choosing who you think is going to win in college basketball. The first round has 32 games, and you only have to do 63 games to get it. That's it. Easy enough. No problem. The problem is nobody's ever done it in an online format. And it's possible, but not probable. So let's get a quick feeling for why that's the case in terms of the way this works. And this will be one of my last things with you, so we have a little bit of time for question and answer. So let's suppose you have no idea what's going on. None. So you're just going to flip a coin. Look, I don't know who these teams are. If it isn't VMI, I don't know what's going on. So 50-50 chance. So the way this is going to work is that I already flipped a coin. I actually flipped it and then put in the result into the slide. So the way you're going to flip your coin is just decide, do you think the first one is heads or tails? And if you match, then you got it correct. You made a correct prediction for the game. If not, then you have an incorrect prediction. Does that make sense? Okay? All right, first one, heads or tails in your head. What do you expect? All right? All right, so if you got heads, you got 1 correct. If you didn't get heads, whatever. No one's been perfect, so whatever. We'll keep trying. Second one, heads or tails, what do you think? It's tails. The next one, heads or tails? Next one, heads or tails? Next one, heads or tails? All right, raise your hand if you got them all correct. Got a couple. There we go. So we should get several because it turns out that if you do the math, you have two options and you have 5 of them. So it's 2 to the 5th. 2 times itself 5 times, which is 32 chances. What about 63 games? 63 games is 2 to the 63rd. It's 9 with 18 zeros after it. It's called 9 quintillion. The only reason I know that is because I'm interviewed so much at March Madness time that I know that number. They think it's because I have a PhD in math. I didn't get a PhD in what numbers are called. So it's the only reason I know. Okay? So one thing about this, for those of you who teach number sense, that has no meaning to me whatsoever. I have no idea how big that number is. It's 9 with 18 zeros after it. What does that mean? I don't know. It's probably about as big as 9 with 10 zeros after it. You know what I mean? It's kind of the same number to me. So if you could produce 1 billion unique brackets per second, and you never repeat, this is how many total brackets there are, is what that is. There are 2 to the 63rd. So 1 over 2 to the 63rd are your chances of being perfect if you're 50-50. How long would it take to create 9 quintillion, 2 to the 63rd? What do you think, a week, a day, a year? 300 years. So when a student says to me, I'm just going to try them all. All right? Good luck with that. All right? I show them this slide. Well, it turns out that I've developed math methods, some of which are online, and I'll tell you a quick story about that because it's a friend of mine who lives here in Virginia, in Richmond. He's an artist friend. We designed a math method that I worked out with my students at Davidson that actually at times can create brackets that beat over 99% of, it's not 99% correct, but it beats over 99%. Does it always? No. If it did, I would no longer be teaching. But it can. And the thing is, it's math that does it. The site is marchmathness.davidson.edu. When the press got a hold of it, those are all the places that I appeared, just a subset in one particular year, and then it recurs in different years. But I want to tell you the one step of this that was an artist friend of mine. He said to me, Tim, because my art friends, my performing art friends just consider me a performing artist. My math is a separate thing. And my friend said to me, Tim, is there anything you do that I can understand? And I said, yeah, you can understand the bracket stuff. Oh my gosh, there's no way. No. With the bracket, you're going to break the season into 4 parts. That's it. Then for each of those parts, well, how many parts you want, but let's say 4. Each of those parts, you tell me how much a game is worth. Normally, we say 1. But maybe that first part you don't think is really that predictive of March Madness play. So you make it worth, I don't know, a half. The second part, maybe for some reason that's more predictive. So you make it worth 3/4 of a game. The third part is maybe worth 1. And that last part is really predictive, so you make it worth 2 games. If I lose 2 games rather than just 1. That's how we find teams that otherwise people can't find. Because we rank all 350 Division I teams over 5,000 games. We do? No, we wrote a computer to do it. But that's what it does. And that's what that code will do. But this is the part that still moves me. He had never done math with his children at home. With that, each of them came up with how many pieces. They came up with their weights. Then they sat at the dinner table and explained their mathematical model to each other. And he emailed me and he said, it's the first time in my life I've done math with my kids. Then I ran the code because we didn't have that yet, and then sent it to him, and then they competed in their brackets to see who did the best. Those are the kind of stories that we want. Those are the kind of stories that we look for. And that family, they've done it every year since, even when his kids moved into college. So I do have teachers use that code for their classrooms. In terms of, there are other ones too. The one that's the worst really quick, it just hit me, I'm with teachers. There's one on there where you use slope, you use a line. That is the worst model, period. It's just a horrible model because it says that today is different than tomorrow. So like tomorrow we're going to be much more predictive, but unfortunately it's today. But the reason that model is there is literally for those of you who teach slope. It's there for you. Every single time I'm interviewed, oh, don't use the linear model. Why is it there? Because teachers across the country use it. Oh, okay. But that's why it's there. So if you teach that, it can be a fun model to use, even though it doesn't perform that well. It still lets them think about it. So why math? Because the many ways that math teaches us to think. Yes, it can help balance a checkbook. Yes, it can help us do some of those types of things. But it can help us also learn that sometimes we don't understand things, and that's okay. Sometimes I hear students use the term failure. I failed when I did that. I would claim that life is better thought of without thinking of things in terms of failure and success. Aren't the times that we struggled in life often what gives us the perspective that leads to future success? That's, in math, you're not going to get them all right. That's why we have erasers. That's why we have erasers that aren't even connected to pencils. Life needs to be looked at as a space where we need erasers. Where we may not erase the past, but we can erase the trajectory that it necessarily sets us on because we can learn from it. STEM is the area that in so many ways can help us with that. The humanities can help connect us to the human experience and the humanity of what we do. STEM can connect us to the many ways that who you are can help you set an even better future. But to do that, you have to be comfortable with standing in the unknown. Standing when you don't know what the answer is, when there is no answer in the back of the book, when a teacher will not come to your help, and you stand and you wait because you've learned to trust that your intellect and your training will come through. And if nothing else, help you see the differences in the Empire State Buildings, even if you don't know exactly how it happened. That, in my opinion, is the why we learn math. And I think if we keep track of that, the classroom can be a richer place, and your teaching experience can be an even richer experience for you and your students. So I leave you with two quotes that I tell my students. One of my hopes for them in math is the following. It comes from Winnie the Pooh. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. Wherever you go, whatever it is, academically or non-academically, ever keep this in mind. When you're afraid, that's a feeling. But you are braver than you think, because fear can lead to bravery. If you don't know, you don't know, but that doesn't mean that you won't. So that is always my hope. Generally, I state it to students, but for now, I state it to you as teachers. This is my hope for you, in your classroom and with your students. When your student is your challenge, when your student is your question, when their uncertainty is your unknown. And then my last thing is, with math, probably the biggest thing I hope upon everyone is that you simply just jump. Sometimes you won't know the answer, sometimes you won't know where to go. But my hope is that you just try. You just jump and try. The one example I didn't give you relates to Steph Curry, who's a Davidson graduate. Steph Curry misses many, many three-pointers, and yet he's made more in a single season than any other player by a long shot. Steph Curry can only make them if he shoots them, and he knows in advance he's going to miss them, and he never knows exactly when they're going to make it. Isn't that what we want in the classroom? Jump, shoot, try, think, and then let things unravel so that you can see the journey ahead of you and become a more fuller person of who you are and who you can be. So I hope that this gives you handles on how maybe you can even better give your students Math-nificent Stories, so that when they come to me out of Virginia and I say, I want to give you one story, they said, oh, no. I got that. I've got a couple dozen, but give me more, because I see the way that they benefit me. Because when I sit at that table, I want to have a lot of them to tell. I want to have stories to tell K to 12 and then college. That is ever my hope for you. And I know that you do it because I hear those stories at the college level, and I thank you for that. Thank you for your attention. All right, I have time for a couple questions. I went a little bit on the longer side because I wanted to tell you a couple stories because you were an energetic group. Does anyone have a question? That's actually why I go long. I'm a type of speaker that doesn't always generate questions. One quick thing, with Martin Gardner, you remember the penny trick at the beginning? Martin Gardner has a huge number of books that are just amazing. I actually ran an independent study with a student who was going to become a teacher. The independent study was things from Martin Gardner for my classroom. So you might want to look him up because they have this delightful air to them that is just wonderful. The other thing is, with the Steph Curry example, let me just tell you that one since you didn't ask a question because I didn't show it. Steph Curry shoots around 43% from the three-point line. So you pick one of his games and you let your students flip a coin. If you teach elementary school, they can shake the coin. And they shake the coin and put it down. So they have a 50-50 chance of shooting a three-pointer. They're actually shooting better than him. You pick a night he did really well, and you see if they can pull it off. And it helps them see why it's getting attention on TV. And maybe it isn't Steph Curry. I'm just Davidson fixated because he's our grad. Oh, and one other thing about Steph Curry, and then I'll stop. Steph Curry took Calc 1. The first time that I ever heard of Steph Curry, was because of his performance in the mathematical classroom. So when I sat in the bleachers the first time and saw him play, I turned to my wife and I went, that's the kid in Calc 1. And that's Steph Curry to me. He took Calculus 1 and Calculus 2. I'm not sure it helps him with basketball, but it sure helps me with getting people excited about math. All right, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Phil. Tim, thank you very much for helping us understand how to create stories, math stories with our students. On behalf of General P, the Corps of Cadets, and the staff and faculty, please accept this small token of our appreciation for coming today.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Thank you.